I assume he's going to mute us, so I'll give it a minute. Okay. Well, good evening. And I really do want to emphasize that the next two meetings, we're looking to try and look at conservation, and as photographers, how do we, best fit into that? So Dustin has some really unique background that he's going to share with us. I think everybody saw the write-up, and I hate to repeat what you've already seen in writing, but just quickly, the whole idea of environmental educator and conservation photographer was very intriguing to me, Dustin. I mean, the two I don't, in my past, haven't seen. I've been on most of the photographic end, but also always involved with nature. So as you share things with us, I'm sure we're all going to find things that are interesting, particularly with your background from the Archibald Biological Station. And what you do there about building relationships. And the one thing I saw in the package that Dustin sent over was involving youth. And I think that's something that's key to all of us as photographers and as naturalists. So I'm not going to go into a lot of the detail. I rarely do when we introduce somebody like this, but I really would enjoy hearing what Dustin has to say, and take it away.
Well, thank you, Jay, and thanks for the invite. It's good to be here. And Liz Haleman, I don't think you heard me earlier, but I just wanted to say hi. She's an Archibald person as well. Yeah, the working with kids, that'll be the last section of the talk. So the way it'll be structured a little bit is a lot of it'll be my own journey to come to conservation photography, what I've learned about it, like what is this whole concept, and then what have I been doing with it? How have I been using photos to support conservation? And then how have I used those photos with kids as well? So that's the arc that we have here. I also want to say before we start that conservation photography visually does not look like any one thing. It's not about what the picture looks like. And most of my pictures will have people in them. Most of them will be portraits. And my guess is that most of you probably aren't that interested in taking portraits. You want to use photography to connect with wildlife. It all is part of conservation photography. So hopefully you'll get an idea of what I do, what other people do, and figure out how you can make your photography connection, whatever it is that your subject matter is that interests you. Think about how you could turn that into a project that would help that. Say there's a sanctuary that you like to go to, or a certain bird that's endangered. Maybe this will give you some ideas on how to help protect it with your photos. Okay, I will share my screen. And then once I hit share here, you're all going to disappear for me. So I will just be like I'm practicing my PowerPoint sitting in my underwear, right? Like I won't see any of you. I'm just going to talk at my screen for the next 45 minutes. But what I hope is that after that, you will then come on with your own ideas and questions, because that's the fun part for me. Otherwise, it's just me talking to nobody. Okay, here we go. So photography and conservation, stories from Florida's headwaters. Now you are in the Everglades group, and where I am located in Florida is a little further north than y'all, but we think of ourselves also as in the Everglades, but we're in the headwaters of the Everglades. And let's see if we're working here. There we go. So this I like to start with. This is not taken in the Everglades, southern or northern Everglades, but this is where I started out. Maybe some of you have an idea of where this might be. I definitely know some of the people in your group are from other states. I'm originally from Syracuse, New York, and actually I'm in Syracuse right now, while I'm doing this, I'm staying at my parents' house for a week. So those are photographs of places just about 20-25 minutes from Syracuse, New York. I like to show that because a lot of times when people think of New York State, they really just think about cities. I moved down to Florida, down to Archbold Biological Station 8 years ago, about 8.5 years ago now. So you can see that's where I work right there. You may also notice this little light, kind of grayish maybe line in the middle of the state. That's a big old sand ridge called the Lake Wales Ridge. And that's where I live, and that's where Archbold's main property is located. It's an area, it's a big old sand island. It's about 120 miles long, about 5 to 10 miles wide, and it has a bunch of cool plants and animals on it because it's this super old habitat. At times when the rest of Florida was underwater, when the ocean was higher, this was above water. So it's one of the oldest parts of Florida that has been high and dry. Makes it a great place for rare plants and animals. My job is as an environmental educator. I'm the director of the education program at Archbold Biological Station. So this is, well, pre-COVID, this is what a typical day for me might look like. Taking kids out, as well as adults, all different kinds of groups, out into nature and teaching them about the plants and animals, as well as the research and conservation Archbold is a part of. And of course, I've going to bring my camera, and kids enjoying nature is one of the best subjects. Oh my gosh, it's so much fun to photograph them. So here's just a couple of pictures of that. I do love black and white photography too. These are digital, but I love turning them black and white. And after about my first year there, the first year was kind of a blur of me trying to figure out what my new life was going to be like in Florida. But after about my first year, I started to learn about conservation photography because Archbold had worked with a photographer named Carlton Ward Jr., and we still do. And he's a part of this group, the International League of Conservation Photographers. So I'm going to show you some of this little intro video, not the whole thing, but gives you, I think it's a nice overview or introduction.
I think the reason why conservation photography is such a powerful tool is that, we as people, we're such visual creatures, and being able to see a place is much different than hearing about it. You can hear a soundbite and not understand anything about it, but if you see a photo, it means something to you and you have a relationship with it.
And I think that the important thing is to not just to shoot something, it's to care about it and to understand it.
Image making, I think, is only really half the equation. The other half is, what do you do with those images and how do you affect change with the images? And that's where conservation photography becomes its own art form.
For me, conservation photography is about what we do with the images that we produce. The level of commitment that we step into once the field work is over makes a big difference. So it's how to use visual imagery as a tool for conservation in a way that no other of the tools that conservation has can achieve with the emotion.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there, and I recommend visiting their website, and they have a list of all of their photographers that are in their group, and you can just take a deep dive and go on YouTube and start typing in all of their names and find a lot of inspiration. But hopefully a couple of things popped out here for you. One was that it's not so much about the photos themselves, but about what you do with the photos. And hopefully also you saw that it was about telling a story that's a bigger picture. It's the whole story, not just the nature part of nature that inspired you. So for instance, if you're photographing in a forest and you're taking these beautiful pictures of a flower in front of you, but at your back, the forest has been bulldozed, and you never turn around to take that picture or try to help tell that story, then you're missing out on the conservation aspect of it. Go to the next one. There we go. Next week, you have a conservation photography talk on, or sorry, an ethical photography talk, which I think is fantastic. And actually, the link that I like to give people is an Audubon website, the Audubon's Guide to Ethical Bird Photography. But I also put a link to the ILCP's mission and ethics page too. And these, for me, these are the gold standards. These two sites teaching how to, if you really want to do this, how can you do it ethically? A lot of it is in truth and captioning. If you're photographing an animal that's in the zoo, don't pretend it's not in the zoo. Put it in your caption. And one thing that ILCP really does not like are like game farms for photography, where you can pay to photograph a lion and do fake setup shots and stuff like that. They really don't like that. But I won't get too much into this because your talk next week is about it. But I highly recommend going to both of these websites and looking through them. There's things in there that you might never even consider. Like, you know, you're trying to photograph some birds and the bird takes off and flies away and you get a fantastic picture of it. But you never really thought, oh goodness, did I just make that bird fly off of its nest? Are its babies going to get eaten now because they're not protected from, you know, by their parents, just so I could get that picture? So these are kinds of things to think about. So it's ethical photography, both in the way that you're taking the pictures, in the truthfulness and the captioning, and also in wanting to help protect nature as well. The other thing I'll say, okay, before I go to that one, the other thing I'll say is that, all right, well, hold on, I'll come back to that. We'll just keep going on. So I want to mention this website also, Jamie Heimbach. This is really cool. She has a wonderful free podcast. It does, if you want to really get involved with her, it does cost money. She has, and I haven't done this, but you can join her groups where it's kind of like a photo club, but it's pricey, but it's all about helping you to shape conservation stories with your photos. She does have a lot of free content, like that 6 must-have shots. That's free. Her podcast is free. Definitely recommend checking it out. Okay, so I started learning about all this stuff and realized that I had a lot of these stories right in front of me. I was in a very privileged place as an environmental educator at a field station. Not only did I have all the stuff that the researchers at Archbold were doing, but it connected me to the other things. You know, what was the Florida Fish and Wildlife? You know, what are their people doing? What about U.S. Fish and Wildlife? What's happening at the parks? It gave me all of these connections. So I really started seeing it as my responsibility to start photographing the science and conservation that was happening, because I could. So I felt like I had the responsibility. And I've been very fortunate because of that position at Archbold. It's often led to the ability to use these photos. And sometimes it's from Archbold, sometimes it's from me reaching out or people reaching out to me. But mostly what my pictures have helped to have done is to highlight research that's going on, highlight the careers of people like Paul Gray there on the left, to teach kids or college students about the careers they could have in wildlife ecology, and just generally promoting science. That's mostly what my pictures have been used for. The photo of Paul Gray, Scott mentioned when we were on earlier, and you can see that was used by Audubon Florida. So maybe most of you may have even seen this picture already. We went to do his photo shoot, and I was like, okay, Paul, where do you want to do yours? Like, what's a spot that you'd like to work in? And he said, Istapoga, Lake Istapoga, which I've been to several times, but it's known as a scary alligator lake, and nobody ever gets out of the boat. But he's like, it's fine. And we hopped in the water, and we were in the water for probably 45 minutes doing this little photo shoot. And we did not get eaten by an alligator, so that was good. Yeah, photos used in a lot of social media from Archbold, or articles about science at field stations. And then also all of the people I photograph are welcome to use my pictures for their own purposes. So like this Orange Audubon Society, Jennifer Korn was going to give a talk there. She used a photo that I took of her. So it's also a gift that I can give these people who are dedicating their lives to wildlife and wild ecosystems in Florida. It's a gift for them too. Here's your photo. Do with it what you need. If you're given a talk, feel free to use these pictures. And one project I'm really happy with is documenting over the years the Florida grasshopper sparrow, which is a highly endangered species. So I love birds and connecting to bird research. My wife is a biologist who studies birds, and so for years now I've been able to go out and photograph the sparrows and watch as they were declining, watch as the captive breeding program started, and now the captive breeding program seems to be successful. Hopefully it will be long term, and photographing the release of the birds as well. So having a whole big photo essay in Cornell's Living Bird magazine was a really big deal for me. And I've also gotten to tell a story about burrowing owls, research on those, and had some of my photos published in a book about becoming a wildlife professional. So it makes me so happy that my photos can help teach people about these things and get young people inspired to do these jobs. The portrait project for me is probably the biggest part of this when I think of how I understand my work. Even all those action shots, like I want to have a portrait of each of those people in the action shots so that the action shot is the main focus. And I'm going to show you a little bit of a video. This is me talking about this project, and you can see what it looks like when I'm doing the photo shoot. I'm not going to show the whole video, just part of the video.
Hi, I'm Dustin Angel. I'm a conservation photographer and environmental educator living in the headwaters of the Florida Everglades. Thanks for your interest in Boots on the Ground. This is a collection of portraits of conservation professionals from around this area. I love the title Boots on the Ground because we really are focusing on people who have spent hundreds or thousands of hours out in these wild places around here, spending their careers trying to understand and protect the wildlife and the wild lands in Florida. I started the project 6 years ago and have photographed almost 100 people. Within that mix, there are scientists that started their careers 50 years ago studying these landscapes, and there are young professionals now that hopefully will be still out there 50 years from now. That, in a way, gives us a window into 100 years of science and conservation in this part of Florida. The first person I photographed in this project was my wife. I went out with her while she was doing some work with red-cockaded woodpeckers. She spent the morning up a pine tree on a ladder with a chainsaw, making a home for this endangered bird. I had some new equipment for my camera where I could put a flash off to the side and bring in what looks kind of like studio lighting, but be out in nature while I was doing it. And we tried it out. She was covered in all the bits of wood from being up in the tree, got the picture, and I was just so happy with the result of that. And other people really liked that picture too, that I realized this was a project I could expand out. This project has been really fun for me as a photographer because I've been able to watch myself grow and change. When I look at the first photos I took, the frame is mostly filled with the person, and I saw that person as the subject matter. The environment was important, but it was mostly out of focus. And that was because of the type of lens I was using and the choices I was making. But as the years have gone on, many times the person has gotten smaller and smaller, and now the environment has taken up a lot of space in the frame. It's also in focus as well. This project started.
Okay, here I'm gonna stop it there, but you can watch this later if you want to watch it later. So it gives
When
you,
I
I think
moved to Florida.
I think it gives you a good idea of what this is all about here, and it shows a few of the pictures. And you know, if I knew Liz was in this, I would have shown the picture I took of Liz, which was one of the first ones 6 years ago or something like that. But yeah, here's just a few of these pictures. You can see it's about really celebrating these researchers, showing them in a heroic light. The one in the middle I was getting a kick out of, because if the resolution was better, I mean, you're looking at it over Zoom, you could see that there was raindrops all over, and he's all wet. In fact, there were raindrops going down all in front of his face that I had to Photoshop out of the picture. And once I did, I was like, oh, this is such a cool, the lighting is so cool. I love this picture. Just trying to show all different kinds of habitats in this part of Florida, different type of jobs people have, and really show just the variety. One of my favorite comments I get when I show these pictures to people is like, I didn't know that was around here. People who live right near these places but have no idea that they exist. And I'm sure you, as Audubon people, have come across that plenty of times. People living 5-minute, 10-minute drive from a beautiful wildlife preserve, and they've never even been there. And I do like black and white. I mentioned that earlier, so sometimes I do them in black and white. Now, lately, during the pandemic, I was thinking one thing that was really missing from this photo project was the voices of the people themselves that I'm photographing. And when I put that picture up on the wall, it's a beautiful experience, you know, if you're like photography, but you're not really hearing their story of who they are. So I was looking around at what other people have done. There's some really cool projects out there. Humans of New York is a really good one. It's been going for a while. And during the pandemic, I've had to become much better at using technology, doing video editing, and all of that. So I've started now making interviews with the people that I'm photographing, and started a YouTube page up where I'm putting these on. And now the photo shoots can come to life more, because the viewer can watch a little 5-minute clip of the person saying, well, this is what I brought out. This is what I'm holding. This is the gear that I'm using. And oh, that beautiful site, this is why it's important. This is why I was out there. And then the other new thing I've just started learning to do is making 3D or 360 immersive images. So I think at the end I'll have to hop back to this, but that link is live, so when you open the PDF you can do it. Once you open this is a totally 360 image, and you can move it all around, up and down, and then you can even click on that little video icon, and it'll play the interview with this researcher there, Tori. So that's something I'm just starting to learn how to do. And if you had VR goggles, you could use this with VR, virtual reality goggles, and let the people actually visit virtually these remote sites. Some of the places that we're photographing, the general public would never be allowed there, or they're too difficult to get to. But we can now place people inside them with virtual reality. And I want to wrap up here showing some slides from a project I did with kids, where I first started by showing them pictures of the adults and talking about what were they holding, what kind of jobs did they do, and then the kids drew themselves as a scientist. They got to try to pick what they wanted to be, but they had my photos to guide them. So sometimes you'd see them really drawing themselves just like someone in the picture. In fact, on the right, if you could see that, this little girl, Johanna, drew herself pregnant. This is like an 8-year-old girl, but she was so inspired by the picture of Stacy, who was like 9 months pregnant. It was just about to give birth. So inspired by that she saw that, hey, I want to be a mommy, but I could also be a scientist, and drew herself as pregnant too. A couple more of the ones where you can see the kids being inspired by the original drawing. Then the next day, I did the same lighting setup that I do for the biologists, and we brought out the gear that the scientists actually use, and then the kids got to dress up. There weren't really any rules. They could dress up whatever way they wanted to. And again, it's awesome to see some of the kids really inspired. This is actually Stefan on the right. This is his daughter, Serenity. She wanted to look like her dad. And the little girl, Eva, she wanted to look like her big sister, Lexi. So I love these. And then the last part was the next day, they would receive a printed out copy of their edited photo, and then they would write some kind of statement, reflecting on their picture. So I'll share just a few of those with you. This young girl, Katie, I love that expression. She has a pet bird at home, and that pet bird makes her want to become an ornithologist so she can save the wild birds as well. Anthony took land management pretty seriously. I chose to be a land manager because I know what the invasive species are doing to the environment, so I want to help by being a land manager. And they'll see that our next land manager. I want to light things on fire. I love working with kids. And from my point of view, these are both great reasons to want to be a land manager. And it's all about trying. We called the project My Science Future because it was about trying to find ways for the kids to connect with that science part of their identity. It doesn't mean that they're actually going to be doing these things when they're adults. There's some play acting here, but I wanted them to find that part of themselves that is a biologist. Christian, I think you should treat nature fairly, and you should not pollute nature. I fell in love with nature when I was much younger, when I lived by the woods. I will help any animal that is hurt and not feeling good, and protect nature and the wildlife it has. He was a very sweet kid. I think this is the last one. I believe that animals should be treated how we want to be treated. We want to be treated with kindness and to be treated fairly. We're all living things. We all have the power to help those in need. Animals have a right as much as we do to anything they need to do. And so I have 100 of these from all the campers from, this is 2 years ago, the last camp we had before COVID hit. And then the last day of camp, they received a framed copy of their writing with their photo, and they get a camp t-shirt as well. And I have also done this project, a different version of it, with college students. And I have set up booths at a couple of different community fairs where I brought out the equipment, and they were like selfie booths. So I didn't have my camera, but kids could photograph themselves. So that is it, but real quick, I will show, there's these other slides I put on here of some great YouTube videos to watch to learn more about conservation photography, and some quotes highlighting some of the other photographers that are out there working in Florida. Okay, I will stop sharing. Whoa, I went faster than I thought I did. Oh, okay, then I'm going to share again and show you that virtual reality thing I was talking about. Okay. Pull it up. Here we go. So, we're not wearing virtual reality goggles, but you can do this on a computer too. I can go up, look at the sky. I can move it down Check this out. This is magic. Look. My feet are not even in the picture. That's pretty cool. And we start looking around in this beautiful spot here. We can see our researcher out here looking for Florida scrub jays. And if we click here,
in this photo, I am standing.
so I won't put that on, but then you can watch an interview of her talking about the work that she's doing. There's a little baby Florida scrub jays in their nest. So I'm really excited about where this might go as an educator. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. Okay. My other final thought, which I was going to do earlier and I skipped so we could go faster, was that one of the other big differences between somebody who thinks of themselves as a wildlife photographer and a conservation photographer is really that the conservation photographer it's really interested in the ecology. And there's actually a research paper where someone went out and they followed wildlife photographers and conservation photographers to see what their methods were. Like they had similar. I think it was six people that he followed. They had similar assignments. Go photograph that, grouse or whatever. Go photograph that bird for this magazine. And the wildlife photographers did a great job. They went out, photographed the bird, they were done. But the conservation photographers, they try to tell a story about the ecology, about how the bird fit into the whole web of life in that area. And the conservation photographers, they not only thought about how it fit in, but they even knew the biologists that studied it. So it was also about building networks with the nonprofits and agencies that were working with this bird and trying to tell the whole story of the life of the bird, not just getting the one good shot of the bird. I'm not trying to say that there's anything wrong with, I hate saying just nature photography, but that kind of shows you what the difference is. The conservation photographer is really aiming to be an environmental educator, to be an advocate, and to tell that story, whereas a nature photographer generally isn't trying to do that. And I hope that makes sense to you. And that is it. And I'm hoping for lots of questions.
Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. Or if you're shy, put it in the chat room and Alan or I will bring it up.
Well, one comment I'll make while you all are formulating your questions. One thing I like that you did, Dustin, especially with the kids, is one thing I find that really speaks volumes beyond just having the photograph is having the personal story that's attached with the image, whether it's what the person's looking to do, whether the photograph does or does not specifically convey that. I must confess, when I put information with the photographs I post, I'm trying to get away from being a little institutional in the information I put that accompanies it, because I have to remember I don't want to be boring. I want to engage the people who see the picture. And that's part of the push with, I think, with conservation photography. You want to inspire people. You want to provoke people. And your images, Dustin, actually does do that, especially when you include the researchers or those people involved in the various activities you've done, especially when you pull more of the environment in.
Thank you. And that does bring up a couple of important points. I'd say be authentic. A lot of the people that are involved in professionally as conservation photographers, a lot of them have science degrees. Like they started off as biologists, but felt they could do more as a photographer than they could as a biologist. A lot of them have science degrees. I don't have a science degree myself, and I don't know how many of you do either. So don't pretend that you're a scientist. You can start putting your photos to work for conservation in much simpler ways than having to publish a whole book with all, knowing all the ecology of these things. When you are talking about your own experiences, it can be how much you loved that place. Went to this state park, love that they have these birds. I saw on a sign that they're endangered. I donated $10. That is a great conservation photography story right there. Or finding maybe that state park or that nonprofit that you visited, maybe they could use your photo. You don't have to do any work except for take the photo, give it to them, and then they use it for fundraising or telling their stories or whatever it is. But they need photos. And Archbold uses all my photos. That's kind of the deal that I can take. Well, I also work there, but I could go anywhere I want and take as many photos as I want, but then they get to use them as well. And we've worked with other photographers that we've made that same deal with, that they want to photograph rare flowers, that type of thing. How are you ever going to find that stuff if you're not tagging along with scientists that study them? So they get to go out and tag along, but then Archbold gets these fantastic macro photos of rare flowers that we can use. So some of it is just staying true to yourself and letting the people who already have that experience, they can use those photos too.
One comment and one question, Dustin. The comment is from Carol. Fantastic projects, Dustin. The impact you're having on kids is just awesome, outstanding. Thank you for sharing. Do you ever visit nature school programs?
As a photographer, it's weird because, I'm an environmental educator. That's my job, and sometimes that means traveling to other places. Usually, it's bringing people to Archbold and showing them what we're doing there. But I do go out to community festivals, usually like an hour or so from where I'm located. But as a photographer, sometimes I wear a different hat. And I have the project I did with college students was at Stetson University, and they had me out there to work with their, and I see there's a question about college students here too, so I'll combine them, to work with their environmental club of undergraduate students that were planting they plant native trees and stuff like that. And we did the same kind of thing. They didn't really dress up because they just came as themselves, but they also did the writing part of the project too. So I don't know if that answers your question. Usually when I'm doing tours, it's at Archbold. I have occasionally given nature tours off-site, but not very often.
Yeah, one thing I'll tell a short story on is I was in Costa Rica, I think about 6 years ago, and you had heard Dustin make a comment earlier about ethical photography, and in particular, he had talked about if you're photographing a bird, if it happens to be a bird on a nest, did it fly off because you were taking the picture? The one thing that I ran into when I was in Costa Rica, I think it was Monteverdi, but I was on the path trying to photograph a sloth that was about 30 feet off the path, but amazingly only about 10 feet off the ground. And this 15-year-old girl in front of her parents got off the path, walked under the sloth, put her hand up to the sloth. And maybe she knew she'd get away unscathed, but I actually thought, as one who likes to appreciate nature and for it being there for all to appreciate, what she had done, I kind of wished I'd taken a picture. It would have been what not to do. And, but of course, being an underage girl and being a recognizable image, not something I would want to post without permission either. So be mindful when you do that. But it was very telling. So it's not just about scaring an animal, it's sort of respecting its space, although it's kind of one and the same. So, be mindful. Not many of us are willing to tell people what they should not be doing. I know I would rather not, but I try to give a look. That's about all.
I agree 100%. And we've probably all had those experiences, and it's just it's hard to explain the feelings that go through your head, and you want to stop it, but you also don't want to confront people, and yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, one comment here as well from, it says, one activity that I try to do each week is cleaning plastics from the beach. I would like to inspire beachgoers and others to take responsibility for the environment. I took photos of the trash collected, as well as the turtle nests that were out there as well. I would like to know if I can best utilize this to improve the environment.
Oh, that's exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about here. Now, finding the avenue for it is the harder spot. Maybe there's a nonprofit group that's a beach cleanup group, and they could use the photos. Maybe they have a newsletter, or maybe they could use them for fundraising or something. Maybe it's at the local newspaper. Now, I know for most people, you don't generally just write the paper and get articles published. At Archbold, we have a weekly article that we do every week in our local paper here. So for us, we have that in already. You could always write the editor and try, or find that nonprofit or Facebook pages and get it out. That's the hard part. That is the hard part. But if you want to do that thing, you're gonna have to do some work finding the groups or finding the people that'll help you get the story out. But that is an important story, and that's really good that you got pictures of that. Yeah, and it's really sad. But you can also, I've seen positive versions of that too, like before or after pictures. You know, it was all messed up. Look at how many bags of trash we filled, and it's like a positive. Like, doesn't it look fun? Isn't it cool to clean up the beach? So you can also pitch it that way as well.
Jacqueline writes, Balloon Blow on Facebook might be a good organization to contact. And then Scott he writes, as a conservation photographer, what is your thought process when you go into the field? Are you looking for something specific, or just letting the conservation story call to you?
For me, usually I already have mostly internalized like those main shots that I'm looking for. It's not like I think about it a lot the night before, but I don't really script out exactly what I want. But if you knew, like, say a magazine wanted to do a story with you, you might have to script it out a little bit better. So I have done that before. I mentioned Jamie Heimbach's website. She has that six shots for a conservation story. That's really good, and it's similar to what I would do in my head. And I do event photography and wedding photography off and on too. It's the same thing. You want the setting, you need the big picture, you need who are the characters, you need some detail shots, and some kind of action going on. So that's what I'm always thinking. You know, some faraway shots, some close-up shots, and who are the people and what's happening.
And
one comment here. A lot of us this year, and I'm a perfect example, some of the things I put up on Facebook, I focus on my target being a bird or wildlife or whatever. But also, and I haven't posted anything, but I also look for habitat, because I go back to the same locations multiple times usually. And I want to see how the location has changed over the year and over years, because it gives you a good indication what might be there, what might not be there in a particular time. So all I would do is encourage all of us to not only take that shot that's the close-up because you want to see the Crustacara, you want to see whatever, but back up and see the environment they're in and what's around that environment. It tells you an awful lot about where you might find them in the future.
When I did the big project for Living Bird magazine a few years ago, that was the one that I had to really sketch out the most. And I had already taken photos, but then I spent another, I think I had like 9 months to finish it up. And so I figured out exactly what I needed pictures of, and I would take drives. It might be an hour and a half or whatever to get to the sites, and to make sure I had what I needed to tell the full story. And some were pictures I didn't love, like a picture of a sign on the road that says construction. Not an exciting photo to take, but an important part of the story that the habitat is, there's only a teeny tiny bit of their habitat left. And when you go out to where it is, you can see right down the road signs for land clearing. So some of it is needing to get those photos to help tell the story. Or if it's something to do with the ecology, if you do research on your animal first, you might know that it has a special relationship with a plant. If you're photographing a gopher frog, it lives in a gopher tortoise burrow. If you did a project on gopher frogs without photographing a tortoise or gopher tortoise burrow, it would be really weird. You'd want to include some of that ecology in there too.
Michael is asking a question that has crossed my mind also. Do you think we could have an outing to Archibald?
Yeah, right now our gates are still closed. I haven't given a tour in a year and a half since March 2020, which is basically my job. So it's like, super weird. And our summer camp is going to be mostly virtual again this summer. But I think that in the fall, I think everything will go back to normal. I don't know exactly what date. So if Jay or somebody else wanted to book a tour, I don't know what date we can start saying definitively, if it's October or something, I'm not sure. But Dustin, come on out.
Dustin, we can definitely keep that as an open item. And also this coming year, we're going to be doing more outreach to some of the colleges, middle schools, high schools. And I definitely would like to talk to you about some of the thoughts we have there, and how, as experienced photographers and people learning how we can combine with some of these younger people. Now, a lot of them carry the cell phone, don't carry a camera, although the cell phones are just as expensive as some of the cameras these days.
Oh yeah.
What's your take on that?
Bird photography is like, terrible with a cell phone, right? That's really tough. Plant photography, you can photograph plants all day long with your cell phone. And the 360 image I showed you was with my cell phone. And so there is a lot you can do with cell phones. I actually also have lenses. So I have, I'll show you my case here. You can see this is a special case. It's made by the same company that makes the lens, and the lens hooks onto the case. So it's very secure on there. The lens for this is about $100. I forget what the case is, they're $30 or $50, so it's not cheap. There are inexpensive ones too. But I'll tell you, the macro lens that I have, that $100 ones on here, is really good. It is really good. And if you had a program with students and you had enough funding to have a couple of phones with those macro lenses, even if you bought the cheaper ones, you could have a lot of fun doing that. Of course, you wouldn't be photographing birds, but I have seen, if you had scopes with you, sometimes, well, you all know this, sometimes you can get lucky and get a good photo through a scope holding a cell phone there. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Gail writes a comment, Dustin. She goes, I never thought about using my photography for conservation purposes. Thank you very much. And then my question to you is, you had mentioned you're not a scientist or researcher by education. So were you a professional photographer before getting into conservation photography? And what was your inspiration for getting into it?
Well, I went to college for photography. And what was my degree so long ago? A bachelor's in fine arts, painting and photography, with a minor in medieval Renaissance studies. So it's one of those ones where you're really lucky that your parents just go, well, he kind of does his own thing. We're gonna let him follow his heart. And and it was a very artsy school. What I mean by that is when I graduated, I did not really have any photography skills to do event photography or know at all how to draft a business plan or anything. I knew how to think about photography. And I was good at making prints, color or black and white prints in the darkroom. I knew a little bit about lighting, and I knew a lot about art history. So that was my mindset. And when I got out of college, I started as a part-time photographer assistant doing weddings and events. And then I also took a part-time job at a science museum. So these two things ended up continuing on where I was like, oh, cool, science. I'm like, 21, like science museum, cool. I get to handle snakes and, all this cool stuff. Just like a lot like the museum in Orlando or MOSI over by Tampa, like that in Syracuse, New York, a little smaller though. And then it ended up that I really got into the science education, loved it so much, and then got engaged to a wildlife biologist, and she got the job in Florida. And that was like this big moment of like, okay, do I stop as an educator and try to be a photographer, just do weddings? What do I do? And luckily was able to get the job at Archbold as an educator. And I've always wanted to do photography that had a purpose and that told stories about people. And so it took a while for me to really find that voice to think like, this is the story that I was born for. Like, that's how it feels for me. Like, this is what I was waiting for all of those other years, was to be in a spot where I had access to a group of people who are doing something important. And I have the skills that I've developed over the years to tell their story. And so that seemed to me, it's like Spider-Man, right? With great power comes great responsibility. So that's how it feels for me. And I love being able to combine both, use the photos in my work as an educator too.
Well, we really want to thank you for coming in. It's been quite enlightening and interesting. And I'm sure once I share the information you provided on to us, we will probably have questions and whatnot. And definitely we want to stay in contact, Dustin, and as things change with COVID, then we'll look for some opportunities maybe to do work together or, come and share some of your experience live.
I am dropping in a link here. Oh, I put the wrong link in. Hold on. Just a plug for our mostly virtual summer camp. So if you have any kids or grandkids, 7 to 12, if they want to spend the summer getting on Zoom with me and meeting those same people in the photos, doing Zoom meetings with a whole bunch of our researchers, having at-home activities to do, registration is open. And we also have a lot of sponsorships as well. So if they have economic hardship, they can apply for a sponsorship to come for free too. So that'll be my final thought. Plug summer camp.
Well, along with that, I would say too, some of us are snowbirds, are not in Florida, but once you put this on Zoom, it could be available to our grandkids wherever they are.
Oh yeah, last summer we had kids from all over the country doing the virtual camp, and it was really fun. Yeah, they can be anywhere. The way I design the at-home activities is it doesn't matter where you are. And some kids also are in very different neighborhoods. So they might have a park right behind their house. Other ones are in an area that'd be too dangerous for them to walk around in. So it's all very flexible with what they can do at home.
Okay, well, are there any other questions, folks? You can come off mute or type something in the chat.
Yeah, adult camp. So I did this last year. We're done with them now, but every Tuesday morning I was doing virtual field trips for all ages, and it was me with a selfie stick out in the woods showing stuff, and we'd have researchers on as guests, and we had a lot of adults. I thought it was going to be kids, and we had 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds who loved it, but we also had a whole bunch of people that were retired, and some of them were professors and stuff like that too. And the thing is, watching a person outdoors excited, showing you cool stuff is good for all ages. So I'm sure probably next fall we'll start that again, and those were free too. We'll probably start those up again too. If you go to the Archbold Facebook page and sign up there, or to our website, you can sign up for our newsletter. You'll get updates on those things. Okay. All right, I'll stop taking. I know we're running out of time here.
Well, again, thank you. Have a good summer. Enjoy your trip back to Florida. And let's keep in touch.
All right, thanks, Jay. And thanks, Scott, too, for making this happen.
Thank you very much, Dustin. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, Dustin. That was
Thank
great.
you.
Bye, Dustin.